I think that it caused an outrage when this came out last week because of the kind of language that you used to describe what you had done. You talked about your great pride in doing this. You had no repentance about any of it. You thought this was all absolutely fine. The elephant population globally has plunged from 1.3 million to just 400,000, yet you proudly talk of having shot to death 5,000 plus elephants, and you think that this is a valuable contribution to the lives of elephants in the world. And I think people might be curious as to why you would defend such a practice.
The reason why you think that way is because you know nothing about the management of elephants. You cannot manage any species of wild animal at the species level. You can only manage it at the population level. And you've got three classifications of populations. One is an unsafe population, which is declining and is obviously will move into extinction unless it is properly managed. And you manage those elephants according to the principles of preservation management, which means protection from all harm. You get another group of elephants or another population of elephants which is good in numbers, breeding well, and you've just got to maintain them so that they don't exceed the carrying capacity of their habitats. And those elephants should be culled every year to bring them down to a level that they do not damage their habitats. And then what we have got in southern Africa, and this is where the confusion arises, in southern Africa, every single one of our populations is overpopulated, it's excessive. Game reserves like Wankie National Park, for example, are carrying 20 times too many elephants. It's got 50,000 on average elephants there at the moment. It should have 2,500. Now, what happens there is your elephants destroy the habitat, not just for themselves, but also for all the other species. You're losing biological diversity hand over fist. And one of the primary reasons for having a national park is to maintain species diversity. If your elephants or buffaloes or white mice in a game reserve are causing biological diversity loss, then you've got to reduce them to a number that the habitats can sustainably support. If you don't, you end up creating deserts of your game reserves, and then you end up with a desert with nothing in it. No elephants, nothing else either.
Okay, let me respond.
So management is absolutely critical.
My response to you would be this, that many people were very offended by the rhetoric that you used around the culling of the elephants that you've partaken in, that you would go out with another group of hunters and you would indiscriminately blaze away with your guns. And there are other ways that you can do this, aren't there?
Absolutely
not. There are non-lethal options like translocations, which many people believe is a far more humane way.
How?
Well, I've just said translocations, for example.
If you could find the money to capture them and translocate them, we will give whoever wants elephants, we will give them elephants, rather than killing them. But our main problem is to reduce their numbers. Then it's a numbers game. It's the same as happens in Great Britain. With your gamekeepers in Great Britain, they shoot probably tens of thousands of rabbits every year. Why? To protect the British countryside, its biological diversity, the farming of or reforestation of species, and farmers' crops.
Yes, but
if they
rabbits
didn't do
don't
that,
face extinction in this country.
The whole of England would be a desert. So you've got exactly the same reasons. There's no extinction. The elephant is not facing extinction at all. No way.
The numbers, but
if you go to West Africa, yes.
Mr.
The
Thomson,
populations of West Africa are probably facing...
You're making all these statements as if they're indisputable facts, but they are disputed by many people in conservation who just take absolute issue with this and say that the elephant population... if I may finish, elephant populations have plunged from 1.3 million to just 400,000. Clearly, if they carry on at that rate, then they're a species which is facing eventual extinction. You would accept that, right? You
cannot look at the species and say the whole species is so big and it's declining. That doesn't work that way. It is an actual population. For example, I go back 60 years in my experience in Africa on this issue. And if you look at Wankie National Park in 1960, for example, We counted 3,500 elephants in Wankie in 1960, and it was too many because they were damaging the habitat. There were too many elephants at 3,500 in Wankie National Park. It was decided to reduce them to 2,500 in the hope that it would stop damaging the habitat. It didn't work. Today, Wankie National Park is carrying between 135,000 and 80,000, on average about 50,000 elephants. And that it's a 5,000 square mile game reserve.
All right,
that's
Mr. Thomson.
20 times. It's 20 times what it should be. Do you know what is happening to the national park?
Yeah, Mr. Thomson, let me ask you this.
Yes, I'm listening.
Let me ask you this. Did you enjoy killing those elephants? Because the language you've used about killing 5,000 elephants has been described as highly inflammatory.
If I had got emotionally involved in what I was doing, I would never be able to get my job done. The same as a brain surgeon. If he hasn't got the mental capacity to be able to switch people off in order that he can operate on them, he would never be a brain surgeon.
Except he's trying to save people's lives, isn't he, Mr. Thomson?
An elephant
Mr. Thomson, there's one.
If I had all these.
Mr. Thomson, there's one key difference. Brain surgeons try to save lives. Your whole life and career has been in killing great animals. That's what you've done for decades.
I'm not a trophy hunter. Everybody says I am. I'm not a trophy hunter. I have never hunted a trophy in my whole life. Not one. What I've done under government control, under government instruction. I went out to manage national parks, to save the national parks' biological diversity. And you have to be able to handle this business without any emotion. And that's what we have done. If you look at what's happening in Great Britain, for example, did you know that in Great Britain, every single year, they import and release into the British countryside 50 million Chinese pheasants and 10 million red-legged partridges every single year for 500,000 British hunters to go and hunt? I would never hunt any of those. I'm not interested in it. But it brings back several billion pounds to the British exchequer every year, and you've got 500,000 of the nobility in England go out to shoot these pheasants.
Yeah.
What do you say about that? If we are not allowed to manage our wildlife as we see fit in Africa, what happens in England?
Mr. Thomson, I know there are people in South Africa that will agree with you, right? I also know there are many, many people in South Africa who do not agree with you and think that actually it's used as a pretext, as a cover, if you like, to allow trophy hunting to remain prevalent, right? They also say about you in particular that it's the callous way that you talk about all this. I can't get emotional about killing thousands of elephants. I take the oldest one first, then I take the little ones. I've got no regrets. I have no remorse. I have no feelings about these things. These are great animals, right? Elephants are great animals of the world. It would just be quite nice to hear you, who has blazed away at 5,000 of them and killed 5,000 of them, to just say, you know what, it breaks my heart every time I have to do this. Then I might listen to your argument with a little bit more seriousness. But it's the fact that you appear to take such enormous pride in blazing away at these great animals that I think will repulse our viewers.
It's very easy for you to sit in an armchair in London and not have to contend with what the African people have to contend with here, living cheek by jowl with them. I've shot elephants as crop raiders, as killers of men, and for all sorts of other reasons, but also because they are damaging the habitat. They're wiping out whole forests of baobab trees in southern Africa, trees that are some 5,000 years old, and that means that they were 1,700 years old when Tutankhamun was pharaoh of Egypt. And these elephants are going in there and wiping them out because there are too many elephants. Okay. What do you propose we should do with these elephants if there are too many? Throughout
this interview, you've made a lot of points, but you've also showed a complete detachment from the reality of what you've done, which is that for decade after decade, you and your mates have gone out and just blazed away at these elephants, and it doesn't seem to have any impact on you whatsoever. And I simply say to you, is there not a more humane way, at least, of talking about this, where you say, you know what, I really regret having to do this. But there isn't, is there? I think you enjoy it.
All I'm telling you is that I was highly efficient at it. I went in and I got the job done, and I would rather have done the shooting than get some other guy who comes in and pays the bottom dollar to be able to say, please let me come and shoot them. I totally disagree with that.
Okay.
The amateur hunter must not be allowed into the management issues. This must be done. This must be done by the experts, and they must know what they're doing. They must be highly efficient. You cannot be more highly efficient than going in and taking out between 30 and 50 elephants in one quick go in less than 60 seconds.
Okay.
If you can do that, then you're doing your job properly. It's got nothing to do with my emotions at all.